Welcome everyone, it's the 3rd of December and we're on day 3 of the Advent calendar. I really hope you enjoyed painting the Christmas pudding and the snowman, and today let's see what's behind the door. Oh my goodness, what's this? This is a pavlova, but a Christmas pavlova as celebrated in Australia. So I said we had an international theme, so grab your paints and let's get started. So as I mentioned in the previous tutorials on here, that I am going to be painting a series of sort of international Christmas traditions and foods and celebrations, and the pavlova, which is a pudding I adore, I had no idea it was a Christmas tradition. Some of my Australian Patreons were like, oh yeah. So I'm just painting or drawing in these little S curves to create my swirly meringue, and then on top I'm just going to be painting in all the different bits and pieces, but we're also going to have some celebratory sparklers in there, so I'll draw those in too. I've got a bit of paper just to protect the rest of my page because I don't want that to get too sort of overworked, too many marks on it. So right now I'm creating a very, very translucent coloured meringue. So I've got some yellow ochre in there, some burnt sienna, and a little bit of French ultramarine blue. But we want it on the warmish side of things. And I've got my 3/10 brush here. And what I'm going to do is I am going to follow those S curves with the brush, and then I'm going to take a little bit of sort of slightly warmer colour and paint in a few extra little swirls. When you come around the side it's a bit trickier, but I sort of just place in the swirls as if they're getting a little bit more squashed, and just a few more lines. And then on the pavlova itself we're going to have a few different things. We're going to have some peach slices, some red berries, some Christmassy red berries. So to begin with I'm going to start with some the lightest things, which will be the peach slices. So I'm going to paint in a very light yellow, a few semicircles, just sort of dotted all about. Really nice and pale. Then I'm going to paint in some berries. We're going to have some strawberries, which are going to be painted in Cadmium Red. And a little sort of gently curved triangular shape. And of course some might be sort of half submerged in the cream. If you've never had a pavlova before, goodness me, it's delicious. It's quite funny that I've started with 2 puddings. You can see where my focus is at Christmas. And then we're also going to have some blueberries for the sake of a nice range of colour. I'm just looking for the right blue. I think Prussian blue is the right blue for blueberries. Yeah. So just trying to paint them with a tiny bit of unpainted space on them. They're not necessarily really shiny, but it just helps give a very simplified way of making them look like they are rounded because the outer edges are darker than the insides. And now I'm going to paint some alizarin crimson berries, some little red currants. So just get that nicely mixed up. Always good to have a larger brush around to do your mixing if you're working in lots of small colour, because mixing colours can be quite time consuming with a small brush. Actually, I'm gonna continue with my larger fruit, starting to get the details in on them, and then we'll put in the berries as the last bit. So back to my peaches, I've got some Cadmium Orange here. I'm just going to give my peaches a nice orange skin. And my strawberries are going to have a much stronger red skin, so we might see sort of half of that. And even with the blueberries, giving them just a tiny bit extra of that blue, it really makes them come alive. Okay, whilst we just allow things to dry for a moment, let's have a look at how to paint in sparklers. So the first thing we want to do is get the glow at the top of the sparkler. So I'm just going to, with a clean wet brush, just wet the page in a little circle at the top of the sparkler, and then I'm going to just dab in a few dots of yellow. So I'll do that again. And we'll just let those blend out whilst our pavlova is coming together. Okay, now it's time to pop in the berries. So I'm going to use my smallest brush, and I'm going to do little clusters of little red currants, just making sure I don't have too much on the brush. And the beauty of this paper is the paint dries really quite fast, which is fantastic, so we can work quite swiftly. I think this is a really nice idea for a festive pudding. I mean, I guess it is summer in Australia at Christmas, isn't it? So this is a nice light pudding. So these little clusters of berries are a lovely little addition. And because we're painting them in nice and concentrated, they show up really nicely. Now, the cream is pretty much the same colour as the pavlova itself, and we're just going to see little sort of hints of it. We're not going to see a huge amount. So I'm just going to paint in little sort of dabs here and there. But what I am going to do for a nice festive flourish is I'm going to put a few little leaves, a few little berry leaves popping about. So I've got Sap Green, and I'm going to begin by just painting in very simply some little leaves like this. Once those leaves have been painted in, we can just do a little extra line in a slightly darker greeny blue. And this is the point where I just love painting, because you just get to pop in all sorts of little details that a lot of people would think you're a bit mad to go for. So I'm just popping in a few strawberry seeds in alizarin crimson. And then the last little things, a little bit more shadowy detail on the pavlova, so I've just got a slightly darker colour, and I'm going to come from the middle and go downwards. And then the sparkler, I'm just going to add now that's dried, clusters of dots in a bit of a halo. Cadmium yellow is so good for this because it's quite an opaque yellow. My first one was quite methodical, this one's a bit more random. And then if you want, you can just draw in the line of that sparkler where we can see it. If you're going to rub out the pencil. And there you have your celebratory Christmas pavlova.